Welcome to the channel, Cheating Secrets. I'm one of those people others tend to open up to. Recently, I was speaking with an elderly man, and unexpectedly, he told me about his childhood. He had lived with his parents in an expensive house in the best part of the city, with a large garden and a stream running through the back. His mother left his father for a laborer who had come to do some work around the house, and she moved with him to the slums in the city center, where they shared an outdoor toilet with the neighbors. More than 60 years later, he still couldn't come to terms with what had happened. There must have been some kind of magic that seducer possessed, he said. That conversation became the inspiration for this story. Michael slowed down as he drove along the promenade to let a bus pass. Even on this overcast spring day, people were walking along the seashore. Dogs chased balls, splashed in the water, and shook themselves dry. Grandparents pushing their grandchildren in strollers passed by sunken gardens and the lake. Michael had always loved this place when he was a child. His parents often took him to the lake, letting him steer a tiny rented boat around the small island in the middle. He enjoyed the chance to take the helm while his parents, snuggled together in the back seat, joked about his driving. God, those old boats had such a smell, and they were so loud. But he loved them, he loved that time. Now, the lake only had rowboats. It was quieter and more environmentally friendly, but not nearly as fun, Michael thought. His parents divorced when he was 9. It was the biggest shock of his life. They had always seemed so close. One of his friend's parents had divorced too, but in that case, they clearly hadn't even liked each other. For Michael, it was obvious that his parents adored one another. That's why it made no sense when his mother gave it all up for a fling with the laborer who came to build a stone fireplace. No wonder the design became larger and more elaborate, he clearly had his eye on her. As she left, he watched her get into the work van. She looked hesitant, her shoulders slumped. Looking back, the adult Michael saw her not as a woman swept away by great passion, but as the saddest woman in the world. To his childhood eyes, he simply wanted his mother. He remembered the crash of stone as his father smashed the fireplace, still dressed in his office suit. He stacked each piece of rock on the driveway before they were later used to build countless rock gardens throughout the neighborhood. The original fireplace was reinstalled, and his father never saw his mother again. Michael didn't see her often, but she was still his mother. She put up with his childish mood swings, and later, with his teenage bitterness, in the rare moments they met. Michael finally turned into the parking lot of the nursing home overlooking the lake. It wasn't like any care home he had ever imagined. It looked more like a high-end hotel. It wasn't one of those dreary municipal facilities with hallways reeking of boiled cabbage. In this place, the air was filled with the scent of flowers, often fragrant lilies from fresh bouquets placed in every room. In the lobby stood a grand piano, surrounded by mirrors. There was even a ballroom with a stage where numerous guest performers entertained the residents. On the ground floor, there were several lounges, a game room, a library, and 2 restaurants. Living here cost thousands of pounds a month, even for the small rooms at the back of the building with views of the dumpsters. The premier suites were more like luxury hotel rooms, complete with balconies and views of the lake and the beach beyond. His father, Samuel, lived in one of those rooms. His father was a wealthy man and apparently had considerable business acumen. He wouldn't have any trouble covering the cost of the nursing home, even if he lived to be 200. He was now 82. It had been his decision to move into the care home. As his mobility declined, it became increasingly difficult for him to navigate his large house. Physically, he was in good shape and healthy in every other way, so he didn't need caregivers. What he needed was companionship. Samuel missed having people around, someone to talk to. Of course, they could have hired caregivers for companionship, but Samuel understood perfectly well that such companionship would be purely professional, people paid to show interest and to listen. What he truly wanted was genuine interaction. He wanted to speak with people his own age, people who understood what it felt like when your body could no longer keep up with your active mind. That's why he chose to move into the care home called the Smuggler's Rest. It had been the right decision. Although Michael was now very busy managing the many business interests passed down to him from his father, he still found time to visit him occasionally. They were very close and very much alike. After the divorce, Samuel had raised him alone. Generally speaking, it was unusual for a father to be granted custody of a child. However, it wasn't so unusual when the father was wealthy and could afford the best lawyers money could buy, and when it could be proven that the mother lacked the financial means to support her son and had also been unfaithful to her husband. In those days, women were judged harshly. She was labeled an adulteress, a liar, a wicked woman. Michael certainly judged his mother harshly at the time, and he still does, nearly 50 years later. He never forgave her for cheating on his father, for betraying their family. He needed her, and she left him for some rough, penniless man. She had left her devoted husband, loving son, and beautiful home to live in a van on a farmer's field with no running water. Yeah, that guy must have really offered her something extraordinary. Michael was pulled out of his thoughts when Jenny, the receptionist at the front desk, politely cleared her throat. "Sorry," Michael said. "I was miles away. Is Dad in his room or one of the lounges?" "No," Jenny replied. "He went out in the minibus. He and your mother went shopping. They should be back in about 15 minutes. It took Michael a moment to process what he'd just heard. "What do you mean, my mother?" "My father divorced my mother 48 years ago. Whoever he's with, it's definitely not my mother." Jenny looked uneasy at Michael's sudden burst of anger. He was usually such a kind, gentle man. She hadn't meant to upset him. Mr. Jennings, the manager, approached. "Jenny is right, Mr. and Mrs. Jones went shopping together." "Mrs. Jones? Mrs. Marcia Jones?" "Yes," Mr. Jennings said. "Your mother recently moved in here. Your parents spend a lot of time together." "Well, actually, they spend all their time together. She initially booked one of the standard rooms at the back of the home, but Mr. Jones insisted she move into his suite. He said she'd enjoy the view more." "Are you all right, Mr. Jones? You look a bit pale. Please, have a seat, I'll ask someone to bring you some tea. I think you could use a strong one, with plenty of sugar." Michael walked into the nearest lounge, sat down on one of the large, expensive sofas, and stared out the big picture window, barely noticing the promenade, the lake, or the beach beyond. "There we go, Mr. Jones. Do you mind if I call you Michael? I'm Jason, by the way. I can see I've shocked you. I assumed you knew your parents were back together." "I apologize, it was unprofessional of Jenny to mention it that way, but I assure you it was said with complete innocence. She's a wonderful girl," he added, smiling at the lovely Jenny. If only he were 10 years younger, well, 20, he would have gladly made her Jenny Jennings. Shocked. "Jason, my parents have been divorced for nearly 50 years, so yes, you could say that." "I can't believe it. I saw her occasionally over the years, but as far as I know, my father hasn't seen her since the day he threw her out of our house. After that, he raised me on his own. Although, when I became an adult, he remarried. It didn't last long. He's been single for the last 20 years. "And your mother?" Jason asked quietly. "Well, she left my father for another man, but that man died not long after. I haven't seen her in 10 years. We lost touch after she got upset about not being invited to my wedding. I was 46 when I got married. I had trust issues after what happened with my parents. Fortunately, I eventually found the right person, and by the time I was 50, I was the father of 2 children. Oh yes, I've seen the boys when they came to visit Grandpa Sam. He's very proud of them, and of you. He talks about you often, and about your lovely wife. The daughter he never had, that's what he calls her. My wife, Eva, enjoys all the fuss he makes over her, and she returns the affection. She really wanted Dad to move in with us, but he refused and chose to move here instead, saying it was the simplest option for everyone." "So your mother never met your family?" "No, although she knows about them. We don't speak, but I'm close with her sister, my Aunt Sue. I told Sue I didn't mind if she shared photos, but I didn't want any direct contact with my mother. Well, that explains everything. What exactly do you mean? Well, before she moved out of one of our one of our standard rooms, every surface and much of the wall space was covered with photos of you and your sons. She also kept a photo of your father as a young man by her bedside, although we recognized him anyway. Are you saying you encouraged this reconciliation, Jason? No, quite the opposite, Michael. We were actually concerned that Samuel might be upset to learn that his ex-wife was here. Of course, he's one of our privileged residents and had already been living here before Mrs. Jones moved in. If he had been troubled by her presence, we would have gently asked Marcia to leave. Then why didn't you? Well, as soon as I was informed, I went to speak with your father and, well, What? Let's just say I found that Mr. and Mrs. Jones had already come to an understanding of their own. Michael looked at Jason's flushed face, as the manager tried to avoid meeting his eyes. Are you trying to tell me you found my parents in bed together, Jason? Yes. I was worried he had fallen. I heard moaning and used my access key. I know some of our more active residents tend to sneak around at night, but that was the first time I personally witnessed something like that. My apologies. Well, Jason, I hope they pay you well, that's all I can say, Michael snorted. You're not exactly thrilled about the news, beyond the initial shock. No, I'm not happy that my parents have reconciled after all these years, and I have to wonder about my mother's intentions. There are plenty of women who'd settle for far less just to get a suite like that and a view like his. And sadly, I'm already familiar with her lack of morals. However, the look of discomfort on your face as you told that story really amused me. Yes, said Jason, it definitely wasn't my finest hour, and it was certainly a shock. So my mother kept all those photos that Aunt Sue gave her. She framed them, and even hung some of them on a large canvas on the wall. Well, said Michael, that makes me happy, to know she still cares about Dad. Has my father seen her room? He did, when he asked her to move into his suite. He seemed especially touched by the photo she kept by her bedside. Oh, and there's the minibus. I'll leave you now, I'm sure you'd like to speak with them both. Michael turned his head and saw his father stepping down the ramp at the back of the van. His mother was as charming as ever, her short hair now more white than blonde. She still had a slender figure and graceful posture, despite the diamond-handled cane she held in her hand. As his father turned his wheelchair, he smiled at Marcia, and she looked back at him with love. It was the same look Michael remembered from his childhood, the very same gaze she used to give his father on the stern of a boat at the lake, many years ago. Suddenly, Michael felt a surge of anger. Why now? Why couldn't they have forgiven each other decades ago? He was already in his 50s, and here he was, falling into his own geriatric version of a childhood fantasy. Years ago, he had prayed for his parents to get back together. He had prayed to God, and even asked Santa Claus. All for nothing. Too late, he thought. Far too late. Michael, Sam said, rolling up in his wheelchair. They told me you were here, what a pleasant surprise. How are the boys? Did they win their football match? Are you on your own now, Dad? Where did Mom disappear to? She's always been good at vanishing, hasn't she? Don't be like that, son. I understand this must have been quite a shock for you, but if you want, I'll explain. Michael remained silent for a moment, then suddenly said, Oh please, do. It's important, I need to hear it. I regret how I behaved all these years. I regret what I did. You have nothing to apologize for, it was all because of her. Yes, I understand perfectly what your mother did. It broke my heart. I felt it was unforgivable. I loved her so deeply, I couldn't look past it. I threw her out and refused to have anything to do with her. She hurt me too badly. She left us. She abandoned us. But she didn't want to. She wanted to stay, with you, with me. But I was so angry. I was in so much pain, I wouldn't listen. Her betrayal became a wall I couldn't get over. In the end, despite loving her, despite knowing she regretted it, I couldn't forgive her. At the time, I was convinced I was doing the right thing. By the time I realized I'd made a mistake, it was already too late. I waited a long time before starting another relationship. You know how those turned out. It wasn't those women's fault, they loved me, but they weren't your mother. Dad, are you seriously trying to tell me you spent 50 years pining for a woman who cheated on you? No, not exactly. In some ways, I moved on. I found success in life, but it's true, I never stopped loving her. I never stopped regretting that I couldn't find an ounce of compassion in my heart for her. She hurt me, yes, but I was needlessly cruel in return. I took everything from her, friends, family, status, but worst of all, I took you from her. That was the most brutal part. I punished her. But it was her fault. She made a mistake. One mistake. Sleeping with someone else wasn't a mistake. It was her choice. Well, it was a choice she regretted almost immediately. One afternoon, he got her drunk. I know she shouldn't have put herself in that situation. I know she was wrong, and being drunk is no excuse, but she was manipulated. I should have protected her, and I didn't. Dad, why are you blaming yourself? Is it because you're so lonely here and desperate for companionship? No, I wasn't lonely, not even before she arrived. Moving here was the right decision. Honestly, it's very simple. It's because I still love her. My life would have been better if she had stayed. I don't have much time left, and I'm done wasting it. I need to be with the woman I love again, before it's too late. Dad, that drunken seduction turned into a real relationship. Have you forgotten that? I gave her no choice. She had nowhere else to go but to him. I made sure of that. I left her with no one. That's my greatest regret. I don't know what to say. I need to talk to Mom. She's at the bar. I think she needed a little something to lift her spirits. Michael glanced at his watch and grumbled, "It's not even noon yet." Samuel laughed. "When you're as old as the residents here, that really doesn't matter. We try to enjoy ourselves while we still can. Just try not to be so judgmental, Michael. You're a lot like me. That's exactly how I used to be, and look what it cost me. What it cost us." Marcia Jones was sitting in a quiet corner of the bar, sipping rose from a large glass. It was obvious she had been crying. Even after everything that had happened, it was still hard for Michael to see his mother upset. He handed her his handkerchief. "Just like your father. He always has a real handkerchief," she said with a faint smile. "How are you, Mom? I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see your father again, to spend some time with him, and I'm terrified that you won't approve. Since when have you cared what I think? You haven't cared about my opinion since I was 9 years old." Marcia took a deep breath. "That's not true. I've always cared about you, and I've always loved you. These past 10 years without seeing you nearly destroyed me. I know I let you down, and I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to love me again." Michael sighed and absently rubbed his hands on his thighs. "I've always loved you, Mom. I just haven't liked you very much. Funny thing is, I didn't want you at the wedding because I felt like I had to choose between you and Dad. I chose him, and lost you completely. Now the two of you are living together like some teenage dream, and it feels like the last 50 years never even happened. I never stopped loving Samuel. He has always been the love of my life. I'm not ready to lose him again. I can't let him go, not even for you." "Then why? You don't cheat on people if you love them." "I know. I've had all these decades to think about why I did what I did. Back then, I knew I was attractive. You were beautiful, Michael said simply. Well, your father always said so. Jeff was doing some work around the house, and we started talking. He made it clear he found me attractive and flirted with me while I served him a cup of tea. I admit, I liked the attention, it felt harmless. One afternoon, he pulled a bottle of wine out of his work bag, and I gave in. That's not an excuse, but he knew exactly what he was doing. At first, I even tried to say no, but eventually I gave in to the temptation. It just seemed easier to surrender than to resist. Afterward, I was so ashamed. I took a long shower. I hated it. I hated that he used me, and that I gave in so easily. Before that, your father made love to me, and now all I had was sex without love. I felt filthy. That's how your father found us. I was in the shower, and Jeff was sprawled out on the bed in the guest room with a big grin on his face. It was obvious what had happened. Your father didn't let me explain a thing. And why should he? I didn't deserve explanations, I didn't deserve his forgiveness. And yet, you ended up with Jeff in that little van, so it clearly couldn't have been that terrible for you. Yes, that was my greatest mistake of all. When your father threw me out, Jeff was waiting at the end of the driveway. I should never have gotten into his van. What was I thinking? He said he'd give me a ride to the station. Of course, I ended up in his van, but I didn't sleep with him again for a while. When I finally did, it felt like punishment, for what I had done, for what I had lost. All these years, I've wondered if I might have had a chance at forgiveness if I had just kept walking, instead of going with him. I was so foolish, and I only made things worse. I clung to the very person who had helped destroy everything. Eventually, we settled into a kind of relationship. I think Jeff, in his own way, felt guilty. There was no love between us, at least not from me. When Jeff was drunk, he'd say he loved me, but never once when he was sober. That was just before he died in that van crash. By that time, your Aunt Sue had started speaking to me again. She found me a small apartment and helped me get a job as a secretary. Only much later did I realize it had actually been your father. His business partner gave me the job, and it was his money that paid the deposit on the apartment. In the end, he still cared for me a little. So, how did you end up here? I doubt a pension would cover more than a few months in this place. I won £100,000 on a scratch card. I decided it would buy me a few good years here, where I'd be fed, cared for, and not have to worry about anything. It wasn't a waste of money. You see, I was so lonely. Even if I didn't make friends, I could still talk to people, be around others instead of being completely alone. And then you saw Dad. Yes, I thought my heart was going to leap out of my chest. I expected his anger, his contempt, but he just smiled at me. He looked at his friends and said, "You'll have to excuse me for a moment. I need to go talk to my wife." He called me his wife. Imagine that, after 48 years of dreaming, to hear him say it so casually, as if he truly meant it. "I think he does mean it," Michael said. "He still loves you. Clearly, no other woman ever lived up to his memory of you. And yet, you ruined his life, yours and mine, until I met Eva." What's that line from the Larkin poem? They ruined your life, your mum and dad. Well, you two certainly did a number on me. Samuel quietly listened and settled down beside Marcia. You should remember the next line of that poem, son. They may not mean to, but they do. None of our mistakes were ever meant to hurt you, but we both regret what happened. You're 25 years older now than we were when we made those mistakes. You're a grown man. So, will you support us once you've recovered from the shock? Michael tapped his fingers on the table for a while, his gaze fixed on the floral display behind his parents. At last, he spoke. What I say doesn't matter. You've both made it clear you don't intend to part ways again. So my objections won't change anything. It seems you've both essentially rewritten history. I'll go along with your version if it makes you happy. I can pretend, but you both need to know that I don't believe it. You've created a narrative where Mom was the victim of a predator, someone who said no before giving in to make things easier. Adultery is always easier that way, isn't it, Mom? You forget, I witnessed parts of it. I know how far you went with your flirting. Maybe you got away with it at the golf club dances when Dad was busy with work. His friends knew not to take it too far, they knew you didn't really mean it. But Jeff was a different kind of man, wasn't he? Once he thought you wanted it, you got it. Maybe you didn't enjoy it, maybe you felt ashamed and dirty, I believe that. But you were still a married woman, inappropriately flirting with a stranger. And you chose to sleep with him, and then live with him. We know all of this, son, Samuel said. Haven't we paid for it all these years? Can't you just let it go? It's the past, can't we just leave it there? Oh, I'll let it go, I told you, I'll pretend. I'll even bring Eva and the boys over tonight to visit Grandma and Grandpa. I'll play my role well. And maybe, with time, I'll even be grateful that you're back together. But I just wanted you both to know, I won't rewrite my history, even if I try to look ahead to the future. Thank you, son, Samuel said. You're better than we deserve. Michael stood up to leave. He always kissed his father on the crown of his head when saying goodbye. Today, he hesitated before doing the same for his mother, then quickly left the bar. Soon, he would need to return to the office, and he'd need to have a very serious conversation with Eva, and maybe hold her for a moment before he could carry on with his day. As he pulled out of the parking lot, Michael looked at the lake and thought about that young couple and their little boy in the boat all those years ago, and he smiled. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like, it helps new stories come to light.